We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm excited to welcome our next guest onto the show, Kalifa Oliver. She is the Global Head of People Listening, Research, and Insights at WPP. Khalifa, how's your day going?
It is going. Like I said, my kids have got me sick, that summer sickness. You survive a year, and there come the kids.
My gosh. Well, I'm excited to talk to you today. Thank you so much again for being here, especially when you're feeling a little under the weather. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns and the work that you do, but also this could literally be anything. But when you were younger, what did you answer to the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, good Lord. What did I say? Okay, so Kalifa Oliver, I am the global head, people listening, research and insights at WPP. My background is in IO psychology, got it from Clemson, go Tigers. And I went to Benedict and HBCU, also go Tigers. I feel like I have to say that. um, so what did I want to be when I grew up? I think I wanted to be, and this is a little nudie, so roll with me here. I wanted to be a psychologist, but initially I wanted to be a child psychologist. I don't know, maybe it's because, I was around children and thought all of us were crazy. But, after doing a lot of research into it, I felt like the kind of psychology I wanted to do, it might be hard. It might be hard for me to face a lot of the things that I would see with children. But I also, I always wanted to do business. So I think when I got that right combination, that's where I landed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fast forward to right now, you're kind of in this role at WPP as the global head of people listening, research, and insights. How has your kind of personal journey really led you up until this point?
I think I think for me, I've always had this penchant for wanting to understand what makes people go, but specifically at work. Right? Why do people go? Why do we spend all
People
our time?
go.
Why do we spend all our time doing that? It's a significant amount of your time just working. And you get older and you start really understanding adult conversations. They all just don't seem to want to go there, but it's, you know, um, my journey, I immigrant, came from Trinidad and Tobago, came over here, opportunities on scholarships, and of course, really always wanting to understand that question. Okay, why? Why are we doing this? What makes people tick? What makes people want to do this? What motivates people to work? And what I started to realize too is we have to find a way to measure it, right, to make sense of it. And so when I got into IO psychology, there was a lot more quant in it than I thought. If I had known ahead of time, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But I realized we're able to ask questions and get some answers and fuse some numbers in there and really start to back it up and make empirical decisions. And so it's like a fusion of numbers and people and recognizing that our numbers are people,
Yeah,
and sentiments and emotions and feelings, and we can make a change. And the one thing I've always wanted to do is make a change. How do I make the biggest impact? And I'm learning now that by listening to people, by giving them a voice, by telling them they matter at work, it's led me to that point where that's what I can do. That's what I can do for a living. Listen to people and be that voice and that conduit between those who work at the organization and those who lead the organization. We don't have to be against each other if you have somebody like me in the middle helping tell the story.
absolutely. I mean, talk about making an impact. Active and empathetic listening is one of the best ways to do that. And speaking of the why, asking questions, looking at data, and making positive changes for folks at work where we spend a lot of our time, whether it's virtual, in person, or a hybrid.
Absolutely.
Sure. We've seen a lot of changes, of course, over this past year, but I wanted to ask you in terms of employee engagement and just people
Mhm.
listening, what changes have kind of you made and what do you see as being changes that are not only for this time period, but might be long lasting?
I think a lot of employees have finally recognized that their voice matters and that they're not just a thing and then a commodity on one side of the balance sheet. I think employees for a long time, were taught just be happy you have a job, like you're doing the company a favor and they're just going to throw some cash at you. They are quickly learning, oh, you need me, right? So I think COVID has kind of allowed organizations to flatten, allowed talent skills to flatten the talent pool. And it's allowed organizations to really reset and take a look at themselves. When you're constantly moving and chasing shareholder price and stock value and profit, you really don't have time or don't make the time to stop and figure it out. Here, COVID came and said, you're going to stop, you're gonna reset. We're gonna teach some lessons and you're gonna figure it out. And I think that is here to stay. You can't, put the toothpaste back in the tube. There are a whole bunch of people who just found out they can work just fine from anywhere. You can't tell them now they need to be in the office. Everything you say about that now is gaslighting because you didn't shut down, right? In some senses, the idea of return to work is gaslighting because it's really return to the office. Ain't nobody stop working. Nobody stopped working. I mean, a lot of people had to stop by force, but it's the office, you know. I read an article the other day where they said people are going to miss the traffic. Are they though? They really are not going to miss. Nobody misses a commute. Nobody misses that. And I think those attitudes are here to stay. The idea that people with disabled or identify as disabled, they can be accommodated. People who have responsibilities outside of work, regardless of whether they're parents or taking care of an elderly family member or just a family member or friend, there is room for flexibility. Flexibility is not going anywhere. Remote work could be hybrid, but what we're learning is the personalization of work. It's been here, but it's been in the shadows. Now it's up front and it's in glitter and it's not going anywhere. And I think that's so important because it intrinsically helps with well-being. It helps with satisfaction, it helps with engagement, and it overall helps with that employee experience. And as much as people don't realize that, it influences diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it is not going anywhere. Can't unring the bell.
Yeah, I like the phrase you can't put toothpaste back into the back into the tube because
Yeah,
we've all proven that, especially for corporate roles, you could be flexible and you can work from home or literally work from anywhere. I know a couple of folks are digital nomading as well. And as long as you have a computer and an internet connection, you are connected to where you work. And I want to go back to an earlier point you talked about where employees voices matter and the feelings that they have around the workplace, how they're feeling with their team, leadership, and just if they feel like they are included in the organization. But some folks are at a different part of their journey, and depending on where you sit in the organization, like someone who is a manager might feel like their opinion, they don't have a lot to lose because they're in a manager position, but someone who just
exactly.
started entry level, like might not feel comfortable saying, I don't feel safe going back to the office because of health reasons, mental health reasons, what have you. So I wanted to ask, like, what are your thoughts around what kind of feedback is anonymous and what feedback is not anonymous? Are they both important? Yeah, it's a question.
So it's loaded. So let me
Yeah.
start. First of all, let me tell you why I love Gen Z and millennials. But I'm at the tail end. I think y'all trying to call me geriatric now. I need y'all to stop. But um, I love Gen Z and I love millennials because you know what? They're like, you know what? I'm learning all these lessons and I'm not doing the same thing all of y'all have done. I don't care what y'all promised. We will not be in debt. We are not being forced to do anything. And I think that is beautiful. And, I think y'all have figured it out. Or can I say we? I'm saying we. We figured it out. And I think that influences the jobs and what are we doing in terms of jobs. They have learned to find their voice much earlier than many older generations have. They've learned to say no and push this back. We can do better. We can do better, and we should do better. And what you're doing is impacting me and the people who are going to come behind me. And I think that is fantastic. And I think we don't give enough credit to the younger generations for taking a stand. I think that's beautiful. In terms of the employee voice and managers and, people really trying to figure out if they have a voice, because that is really the problem. To your example of managers, right? If you're trying to find out if you have a voice, the truth is you do. This all goes back to the organization, and this is why listening programs are important. Um, when you don't have a formal listening program, this is what I tell everybody. People are going to talk to whoever listens to them. So if you don't want to set up a formal listen program and you don't want to take control of that conversation and have that conversation, they're going to talk on Glassdoor. They're going to talk on Indeed. They're going to talk on layoff.com. They're going to go to the Senate and talk. They're going to talk to somebody, right? And a lot of times when they talk to those somebodies, they're talking in person, but they come across as anonymous. Okay. And so let's go back to the anonymous and anonymous, non-anonymous, which is confidential. I think both are important. They both have pros and cons of each one. Anonymous allows people to feel free to say things, but there's good and bad in that. That's where we have trolls. Um, so anonymous is good because people feel more free to say certain things, especially marginalized and underrepresented groups who are afraid of being identified for because they're afraid of the repercussions that will come from it. But when you're trying to do things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and you're really trying to understand what's going on in your organization, anonymous surveys don't help very much because you can't cut the data like you would like to cut the data. It also means that your survey or your tool or your focus, it has to be longer because we got to spend all this time trying to ask somebody to answer. So you also create room for error. Somebody just not paying attention, or people are just gonna lie. They're just gonna lie because once again they're afraid of being identified, but they want to talk. And so there's also privacy issues you have to think about. So a lot of times you have to go to on to anonymous because people are afraid of the privacy issues, and then your organization might not yet be set up to really take care of what happens if somebody talk about discrimination, what happens if somebody talks about harassment or bullying, violence. You have to figure out, you have a moral and ethical and at some point it's legal obligation. At that point you got to say something. When it's anonymous, then you have another ethical issue. If somebody reports this, how do you find out who it is? And even if they put their name in there, because you said this was an anonymous survey, do you still get to escalate it even if they put their name in there? You know what I mean? So you have those issues. So I think when you just want general information, you just want a pulse, you just want to find out what's happening, anonymous is fine. But if you want to make strategic decisions, you need identified or non-anonymous surveys to get your best results. And it's one of those things, is a catch 22, and you have to decide what is more important and what outweighs what, depending on what you're trying to do before you make the decision. It's pros and cons with both, but organizations, I strongly recommend identified surveys. Now if you're just starting on your journey, you got to build trust first. And when you're just in trust building mode, go anonymous. I mean, it's harder. You got to ask longer surveys or whatever. You got to do more focus groups, but all the focus groups are not typically anonymous. But um, you might want to go that route because you need to build trust first before people will be okay with sharing how they feel.
Absolutely. I appreciated your point about how if you don't have a formal employee listening program, people are going to talk anyway. They're going to talk to their peers, they're going to talk online
Oh
and
yeah.
sites
Well,
you can,
they're gonna talk about you.
yeah, they're going to talk, and people always have feedback, whether it's positive, negative, or in between. And they're looking for places to share. And ideally the feedback that they share, like it wants to be actioned on in some way. You want to be seen, heard, listened to at your organization. Um,
Absolutely. Just valued. People just want to know that they're valued, like any other relationship.
they want to be valued. They're making an impact too, going back to your earlier point as well, making a change at their organization, bettering it for others. I think it's a win-win situation. Is there something that was surprising over this past year that either you've heard employees give feedback on, or just like seen, whether it's at WPP or like in the news in general?
I answered this question recently. Not to me. A whole lot of surprises to me. I think I've been doing this long enough to be like, I've been trying to tell you all this for a long time. My surprise is almost more into how surprised leaders and department leaders are um to what the feedback that they do get. I totally told you this last year. I think one of the things that has become clear, though, especially in majority white organizations or where there's not a balance or reflection of the population, you see a lot of people who just don't want to disclose. They just don't want to disclose anything about themselves. They clearly are feeling DEI issues, inclusion issues, but there's a fear there. One of the things that I've learned is not to look at your inclusion is items in a survey when you want to understand inclusion. And I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but start looking at your psychological safety and ethics issues. Look at those items because those items have less social desirability and people will have a tendency to tell you how they really feel. Well, I don't know if I can do that. I don't think I'm comfortable telling HR this. Look at that, then split your data. It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary what you will see because you're like, oh my goodness, we have so many people who just don't feel comfortable, or so many people who don't trust our leaders. Those are the ones that will catch your eye. Your inclusion items could be tricky, right? Because people tend to be like, I guess I feel included. I guess my team is cool. And people often, especially when they're underrepresented, they tend to just kind of go with it because they feel it'll be identified very quickly. But those are the other items where you're like, oh, we got
We have
so
some work to do.
we
Yeah.
have some work to do. Yeah.
I want to just highlight the psychological safety piece because I think a lot of organizations, and especially building trust in organizations too, a lot of people are, again, putting emphasis on that voice of the employee, trying to build that with managers, teammates, leadership as well. What does that really look like in practice for you, and how do you see it manifesting at organizations at large?
I think in terms of psychological safety, you have to think of it in terms of people's level of comfort being authentic, and not just being authentic, their ability to speak up, or their comfort level speaking up when they feel something is wrong. I think that is how you measure true psychological safety. Because for a lot of people, psychological safety feels very loosey goosey. And, when people are literally dying of a virus and when people are literally afraid of getting sick, they're thinking, I want to know about my physical safety, right? But psychological safety is a big deal too, because in your return to the office type things, that's a huge, people are worried about, if I go back, what does that mean, right? Am I safe to say I don't feel comfortable? And we're in a polarized world right now where every opinion has a whole bunch of naysayers, where everybody feels like they're being pulled in multiple directions, and an office is full of politics, and they're about to find out just how much office politics actually exists now. I give everybody like 3 months and they're like, I'm sick of this. um so I think it's hard to understand psychological safety, but I think psychological safety is a byproduct of some of your policies. um, Psychological safety is a construct that your organization makes, where people don't feel like everything gets retaliated against.
Mhm.
And I think that comes straight from seeing action. If you are rewarding bad behavior for whatever reason, so let's just say you're rewarding bad behavior by you set a goal and you say, make this goal, and people are doing anything to make the goal, and everybody's seeing that this person is lying, cheating, and stealing to get to this goal, and they're still getting the rewards, right? And they don't feel like they could speak up because they're getting rewarded. Your leadership is
Right.
rewarding the behavior. Then what's the point of speaking up? You are sending a very clear message about safety. You know what I mean? And so I think safety is psychological safety, and safety in that sense is a part of a culture, and it's going to be a part of the experience that somebody has. And psychological safety is highly related to toxicity in the workplace. When you got a toxic workplace, what you're essentially saying is there is no real psychological safety in there.
Absolutely. And I think those examples as well of modeling that behavior, celebrating behavior, like saying that this is the way that you should act, or these are the things that you can do to be celebrated or get the bonus, what get the promotion, what have
Right.
you. And I
Right.
think they're non-verbal, just like signals, as it's about behavior.
Yeah,
Um,
it's almost like you nudge bad behavior, right?
yeah,
You just nudge it.
yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. You nurture it, you nudge it, and that's what you're saying with these actions. I know on your show you talk about company culture just in general and fostering it. The common thread being in just like rooted values, which
Hmm.
should really be a bottom up approach. Like, can you
Yes.
talk more about what you mean by that?
So a lot of people think that a lot of leaders, okay, I think I'm picking on leaders, but I love y'all too now. Just want to say that. What our culture tells us, our overall professional corporate culture tells us, is when your leader goes in, a leader comes in and sets the culture. That is absolutely not the truth. It's not what happens. You can say whatever you want. You could write whatever you want. You could write whatever values you want. You could say whatever you want. But if from the bottom up, that is not being shown and demonstrated and practiced, you have this huge divide between what you say your culture is and what your actual culture is. If Yes, leaders at the top need to model the behavior, right? They do need to model the behavior, but the truth is, what is modeled is what people are seeing daily. If I'm a frontline worker, what is modeled is what I'm seeing daily. I don't really care what CEO is doing up in the office, in 3 states away. I don't care. It could be annoying, but I don't care. But I'm seeing what my coworkers are doing. If I'm new, I'm seeing what my new colleagues are doing. I could see what my manager's doing. And so it starts to permeate from the bottom. And once you start having toxicity, it don't matter what you say. You can come in and say, we have the best culture. Everybody loves us. You could pay for every award. Yes, I said pay for every award that you want to say that you are the best in the business. But people aren't stupid. People
Right.
aren't stupid. And, if you measure your culture and evaluate your culture and try to root out the issues and really try to foster that culture from the bottom up, then you have a culture that matches the values that you laid out. And so that's what I mean by culture does not start at the top. It doesn't. Look at any society. If you just look at culture in a society, culture doesn't come because the prime minister of a country or the president of a country said something, or the king or the queen or whoever. The culture comes from everybody else and what they practice. That's what the food is cooked. That's what the language is spoken. That's what the dances are done. And so that's what culture is.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember too, in a good kind of comparison as well, especially for leaders. And I think a lot of people are thinking about the changing role of leadership, and also managers as well, just the large impact that they have at an organization. Do you have any kind of advice for organizations who really want to bridge that gap between leaders, middle managers, employees, old employees, new employees, just making sure there's a common thread there?
Listen and invest in it. And I'm not saying that because I'm like completely biased, but you have to start developing listening programs. It is no longer an option. And when I say listening programs, don't insult me by thinking I mean a survey. It's just not one survey. You need to do active and passive listening. You need to give people a place to talk, like on your intranet. You need to data scrape websites to understand what's going on. You need to model data. So if you're trying to listen to what people are saying in qualitative data, like comments and open text and that kind of thing, model listening behaviors where you're not searching for specific things. They call it that word search technique. Model it so that you're getting some organic themes that are coming out so that you're not always listening to what's already in your head. Another major thing to do is when you build out listening, build a diverse listening team. I can't get enough. Because the problem is, if you listen and you have one list person listening and they're hearing exactly what you hear, you're not listening. You're subject to doing the same thing. So all it becomes is this big performance, and people are just throw their hands up like, this is stupid. I'm going to glass door.
Yeah,
So you do need to find a way to listen, and you don't have to start with a comprehensive listening program. So when I say don't just do a survey, I mean do one, right? But don't let that be your be all and end all. There's so many ways to listen to people. There's so many ways to give them a voice. You have town halls, you have comment sections, you know what I mean? You have so many ways you can really listen to what's happening to your people passively, actively. You have organizational network analysis. Like, just invest in it. I think a lot of companies start it and then they don't invest.
right.
And when you don't invest, it's gonna break, right? It's just like you're in a relationship. If your significant other listens and then goes, okay, after 2 seconds, like you are not listening to
Right.
me.
Yeah.
We are not communicating here. What we have is a failure to communicate. Stop it. And then that's where you get turnover and bad feelings and toxicity.
Absolutely. I think that's important too, just to highlight that you can't be one and done with your employee listening strategy, whether it's a survey, whether it's just like, one of the strategies you mentioned too, it's a holistic approach and you have to be
Yeah.
super intentional about it because also, again, like employees are coming in with different experiences. Maybe you have the best culture in the world, but at another company they were retaliated against. So they have that kind of behavior of just like, well, I'm not going to
Exactly.
speak up because in this other place, my voice wasn't heard, so I don't know how it's going to be heard here.
Exactly, exactly, absolutely. And then the other thing is acting as part of your listening program. You have to act. So don't set up a listening program if you have no intention of acting. If you're not doing it with the best of intention to act, if you're not doing it with a real commitment, just don't do it. Just don't insult your employees because nothing erodes trust more as to when you pretend that you care for a sec and then you do nothing about it. Like then they're like, okay, screw you. I'm not helping you
Yeah.
anymore. It's an insult to your employees, and your employees matter. And in the past year, that's become very clear. Employees matter. And they're being seen as people now. They're not being seen as just an expense. And one of the things I always tell people is that think about the most expensive thing that you have, because everybody likes to talk about how employees are expensive, HR is expensive. Okay, think about one of the most expensive things you've bought. You take care of it, right? It
Right.
costs you money. Your car, I don't care if you have a $500 car, that could be expensive to you,
Yes.
right? You might be, like I once was a broke college student. That car is your everything. You know what you do? You wash it, you put gas in it, you check the oil. It's the same thing. How are you talking about your employees? They're too expensive. We spend too much money on employees. We'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Don't let them break. You know what I mean?
Absolutely take care of them, and also just retaining employees. It is
Yes.
part of a whole system. And then when there is so much data around when employees feel like they are part of a team, they're connected, their voice matters, they're more likely to stay and also produce better work for you. So it's not
Yes.
nice to
Yes.
have, it's a need to have.
It's a need to have. It's not before they've treated it as a nice to have. But I think, COVID came out and COVID girls said, okay, we got to do better. Let's try this again. And I think companies have an opportunity right now to try it again. Some are not, and they're about to. They said they're gonna learn today.
Yeah.
you know,
They're definitely going to learn. And I think a lot of kind of feedback that we're hearing as well from employees, especially as they're working from home over this past year, is they're tired. It's burnout. You mentioned a lot of people have things going on at home that are unrelated to work, whether they're caretakers, working parents, living alone, having to deal with like loneliness and isolation, all of these different human characteristic, mental health, like the
yeah,
list go on and on.
yeah.
Do you have any kind of recommendations or just what you've seen work really well in terms of proactively mitigating burnout if employees are giving this kind of feedback?
I think some companies got it right, where they said, you know what, y'all, we are on like December 125th of 2020. I'm gonna give y'all a break. I'm gonna give y'all a deal. I think that's important. I think encouraging people to take time off, and not in the take time off wink wink type of way. It's the okay, I need y'all to take some time.
Yeah.
I need y'all. A lot of times with people, it's how are you? And it's not just how are you, everything's fine. How are you? And really recognizing people as people, because there's something about feeling like you're seen, you
Mhm.
know, and a lot of work is being done online right now. And there's something about those Zoom boxes and those Microsoft Team boxes where you're now seen. You see me. I'm being seen very differently. And my box is the same size as the box of my leader, as the, you know what I mean? We all looking the same. And we all have that little square. Right? We all forget to unmute ourselves sometimes. And so I think just that acknowledgement that things have changed. I think a lot of people initially just try to ignore it, but it's different and it's hard. And this is not normal remote work. This is not normal. And I think people need to acknowledge this is not normal. But that said, when I talk about remote work, there are some jobs clearly that cannot be done remotely, right? If you work in a plant, if you it cannot be done but be done remotely. And I think organizations, when they're thinking through their strategy, they have got to think about the jobs that cannot for whatever reason be done remotely, and give them some level of priority, and recognize sometimes you got to pay them some more, because there's some hazard in it, and they really came through. They came through for you during a very difficult time. On top of that, they finally could go to work without traffic. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, a lot of us being off the road, if we can work remotely or we can work flexibly, has allowed them to also be able to flourish. While, you know what I mean? I think a holistic approach and move away from the performative. Like, we know when it's a performance, okay? Unless you are the actor, like, Robert De Niro, the Denzel, stop trying to act. We
Yeah.
don't believe you. And there's nothing worse than losing trust right now. People are almost expecting leaders to mess this up.
Yeah.
And you don't want to lose your trust right now. So it's fine to say, y'all, I know we're going through it. I understand the situation we're in. Here's what we're gonna do. This has been a time of complete uncertainty. And I think the human condition is, I just want to know, I want some control. And sometimes giving them some information is a form of control, and recognizing that this is unprecedented. We don't know what we're doing, but we are going to listen to you, and we're going to follow up, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to change things if we need to change things. And leaving the door open for communication is really, really important. Right now, I think the most human thing everybody needs right now is the door to be open to communicate what's happening.
Absolutely. I think that two-way communication is important, the employee listening, acting, and then adjusting and being dynamic and not saying,
Yeah.
we've
So
always got
don't
to
stick to
say,
the right. Don't stick to the plan. Like, you created a return to office plan, and then new variant of COVID shows up. Just adjust. Like, we got to move away from this model that everything has to be exactly how I planned it. Like, you would think over the last year, people realize, how much plans got wrecked in March. you know, so understand, you gotta have a plan B, you gotta have a plan C, you gotta pivot. You got to. You gotta figure it out. You gotta be agile. Got to.
be
Have no
agile
choice now.
and come in with humility and vulnerability as well. And I think the first part of that too is understanding you don't know everything, but you're making an effort to listen to employees, to take some action and not just sit
Yes.
still and do nothing.
Right. Absolutely. Like, take your head out of the sand. And listen, it is scary. It's a scary time too for leaders. I am not going to take that. This is hard to be a person to make decisions right now. you you are guessing at best right now. It is hard. So I think we also have to have some level of empathy and sympathy for the situation they're in, but I joke, that's why they got the big bucks too. To make the hard decisions. But um, I think I want to acknowledge that as well. That this is a very and scary
Mhm.
time for them as well, because social media will get you if you make one wrong turn. They'll get you.
Of
So I,
course. No, I definitely agree with you. And I think that a lot of leaders are changing their strategies and trying to implement what you talked about in terms of an open door policy, an open virtual door, and just like you said, Zoom, one form of conversation is just, and it is an equalizer since we all have those boxes and we're in each other's homes right now. I also wanted to ask if there are any kind of emerging trends you're seeing, either specifically with leaders or with companies that you really think we should hone in on and take advantage of now in order for us to be successful in the future of work. I know we've talked a lot about flexibility, leadership, and company culture from the bottom up, but wanted to ask if there's anything else that we should kind of keep talking.
well, yeah, for not wanting to sound cliche, but empathetic leadership is becoming extremely important. And the idea of servant leadership, the model of me on top, you below, it doesn't work anymore. Everybody's like, yes, we know you're the leader. That's why we want a decision from you. We get it. I think that whole show of leadership, nobody wants it anymore. This is the time people want some empathy, some charisma. That has become so important to people, and I've noticed in a lot of organizations, the leaders who have just thrived are the ones who are like, y'all, I get it. this is a mess, y'all. So here's what we're gonna do. I think that is the trend that a lot of people have shied away from. The other trend that I've noticed is people being honest about their well-being. That
Mhm.
is not some, we are moving our way, thank God. And thank goodness we are moving away from this work all day and all night culture. It is one of the things I think a lot of people having to work remotely and work flexibly has done is people have really had to take stock of how many hours they work and how long they work, because you have a tendency to work longer when you don't have a commute, right? And I think people have realized we have got to create this line. This is work time, this is home time, because the place is the same. And I think people are understanding now there is some value to cutting it off. There's we need to do it, and taking stock of your well-being and being, you know what, I don't feel okay today. um this is going on in the world and we need to talk about this. I think it's a trend that needs to continue. I think it makes people uncomfortable, but I think work takes up enough of our time and our daily lives to recognize that we have got to have those uncomfortable conversations at work. Now, I'm not saying fight at work and don't be trolling people at work. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we have a social responsibility at work now. You create a lot of orgs say we're a family, we're a community. Well, you gotta put your money where your mouth is now, and that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Backing up with action and empathetic leadership. I love that. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you kind of want to share with our listeners before we close out our conversation this afternoon, or a key takeaway you want to re-emphasize aside
Yeah.
from, you know,
I think the biggest thing that I want people to understand is all these things that we've talked about today make up the experience people have at work, and they're not separate things. It is just important to measure all of it. I can't stress enough how important listening to your employees are, and that it's not an option. And every outcome that you want is based on the policies that you put in place. Remote work policy, return to office policy, diverse candidate slate policies, promotions policies, performance. Like every policy you have is going, they don't, we treat them too independently sometimes. And I think it's because of how work has typically been structured. But they are outcomes that all go to your employee experience. And, my biggest platform right now is trying to explain to people that your employee experience is a product. You know what I mean? It is a product, it is an end product that you're selling. And I am here to tell you that employees are now shopping. They are, the tides are changing and they are walking into looking at these products like they're in Walmart now. They're like, uh-huh. And there's more empowerment with it, and it's not something to be scared of as an organization. I think the organizations that have started embracing personalization and embracing empowered employees are seeing that when the chips were down, their employees
absolutely.
stepped up, and so reward that behavior, and they will stay and they will work with you. And you know what, there's some who are going to leave, and it's all turnover. It's not bad turnover, but there's some who leave, and just be happy for them. You know
Yes,
what I mean? If you're doing the right thing, maybe they made a choice not to leave. I mean, they made a choice to leave, and that's okay. Because if you're doing the right things, that product, somebody else is gonna come along and say, "Yes, this is the product I want," and that's what you want. That's where you want to get to, and you want to do it genuinely and organically and empathetically. Let COVID not be a blip, you know let COVID be a national reset, an international reset, where we really start seeing people. I'm seeing some of it. We have so much work to do. um but from where I sit, and the kind of things I see and the numbers I see, we could do this really well. We could do it.
yeah, I feel like that's a hopeful message to leave on as well. And I 100% agree with you that the employee experience is a product, and products have different iterations. Products have everybody contributing feedback on it. Products have, it's
Exactly.
like, I think it's a perfect metaphor for this. And not only a metaphor, it's true. And a lot of employees, whether the company is adjusting to kind of the times or not, in terms of flexibility, employee listening, all of this, like the reality is other companies are. So just coming to terms with that as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for speaking with me this
Well,
afternoon. I appreciate it.
thank you for having me. It's my jam.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was taking some notes throughout our conversation, and yeah, I definitely appreciate the time you spent with us this afternoon.
Absolutely. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me.
And on the internet, and as a reminder for folks listening, All Voices believes in the empowerment of everyone to speak up and thinks it's a requirement for the company to succeed. We'll speak soon.
Bye.